It doesn't get any more basic than dead bodies. Huge numbers of extra corpses, far more than you'd normally expect. We've talked about excess mortality regularly since it took off during the spring and summer. Dead children across Europe, dead young and middle-aged adults across America. Cause unknown is now the leading cause of death in the Canadian province of Alberta. And this isn't a small uptick in the Netherlands. Just last month, 16% more dead people. And as the rest of the West goes, so goes the United Kingdom. Headline from The Telegraph. Crisis as excess deaths soar to levels higher than during COVID pandemic. The insurance agents talk about it, the undertakers talk about it, but the government is too busy offering to pay climate reparations to Peking, so they don't talk about it. What's going on? Jamie Jenkins is the former head honcho of health numbers at the Office for National Statistics. Jamie, are we any closer to know what's actually causing all these extra deaths?
Yeah, good evening, Mark. And I think it's good that you're actually talking about it, because obviously a lot of the media aren't talking about it, even when we had practically every single day how many deaths within 28 days of a COVID test rammed down our throat by the kind of the mainstream media. Now, I've looked at the figures. So what we've got, Mark, is about 13,500 extra deaths now over the last 25 weeks. So we're pretty much bang on half a year now. And we're seeing these excess deaths. So when I'm talking to you, probably every single month, we probably bring this topic up. It's becoming like buses. It's regular now. We are seeing this thing. It's a bit of a scandal, really. Now, what we've seen over the course of the summer and partly through the autumn as well is some mini waves of COVID, and that's kind of contributing to some of the older people. So we can strip out COVID. We do know that COVID obviously disproportionately kills the older people. So we can take all of those deaths out, and we're left with a concerning group of people who are around the ages of 30 to 59, where we are still seeing deaths above what you would expect, even when you strip out all of the aging effects in the population, all of the COVID that's been going on. Take that out. Now, I've been looking at the NHS figures a bit in terms of this now. And what's interesting, Mark, is there's no more people attending A&E than what we saw before the pandemic. And there's no more people being admitted to A&E for emergency reasons than before the pandemic. And then you start looking at the waiting lists, and that starts giving you a bit of an interesting picture there, because before the pandemic, people who were waiting for a heart procedure, it was never zero, but it was close to zero. But now we're seeing around 5,000 patients waiting for a heart procedure. And if more and more people are dying of heart issues, which is what we're seeing, and we're not seeing more of them turning up at A&E or being admitted, my concern, Mark, is how many people are perhaps dying with not getting any treatment whatsoever because the NHS closed down because of the COVID pandemic.
I get that, and I think that's certainly part of it. But, you know, there are countries in Europe and North America, Australia, with still functioning health services, and they've also had this phenomenon. We should emphasize a point you brought up back when we first started discussing this, which is that normally after a pandemic, say a century ago, after the Spanish flu, mortality generally goes down because people who might have died in 1923 instead died in 1920 when the Spanish flu hit. So in a normal scenario, we would expect to have lower excess mortality now. Why are government institutions so uninterested in what's killing the population?
Well, this is what's puzzling, because you've been kind of talking to me for several months on this, Mark. And I also spoke to your colleague, Dan Wootton, about this. I think his producers got in touch with the Department of Health and said they were instigating an investigation. Well, this is happening every single week, and I've heard absolutely nothing from the Department of Health on this, as if like Steve Barclay is not even looking at it. This is the type of thing that there should be an investigation. Now, there could be a multitude of different reasons, but even if it was a case that the NHS isn't treating people or getting to see people, we do know that even if you do get to the hospital now, Mark, we talk about perhaps people who are dying not even getting there. If you do get there, the chances of seeing somebody is pretty slim in terms of getting a timely investigation of yourself. And even then, if you're seen by somebody to get admitted to the hospital, those delays have shot up. So there could be a range of different factors, but the fact that we're not seeing anybody whatsoever coming out from government. And look at today, we've got the NHS talking about going on strike with the nurses. They may talk about only striking for non-critical care reasons, but it looks like cancelling all operations and elective surgery could be leading to some of these excess deaths that we're seeing across the country.
Yeah, and actually we should mention that that's the Royal College of Nursing. That's actually quite dramatic. We know that Scotland and Northern Ireland are all in on it, and various other parts of the country too. You know, you and I have a slightly different view on how much vaccine injuries and vaccine deaths are part of this. But there must be ultimately a political reason why the Department of Health has nothing to say about this. And my concern, regardless of how many people you think are dead of the Pfizer and the AstraZeneca or whatnot, is that out of some political calculation, the Department of Health is figuring it's not in its interest to even recognize that excess deaths are an issue here.
Well, I think it's a very valid argument there, Mark. I think obviously I'm, as a statistician, look for all of the evidence in terms of what we've got. Now, if the Department of Health came out and said that we've looked at everything and there's no link at all to anything to do with vaccinations, they can come out and do that. But they're pretty silent. So they're not ruling anything in. They're not ruling anything out because they're not ruling anything. They're not talking about nothing at all.
Right.
We do know there's probably an elevated chance of getting some of these issues when you've had a COVID infection as well. We know loads of people have had kind of COVID infections, but I think the silence is the big concerning thing on this, because like you say, every single day for nearly 2 years, we were told how many people were dying within 28 days of a COVID test.
Yeah.
The only thing that took that off the media was the Ukraine war. If the Ukraine war never started, we might be seeing those numbers continue today, Mark. So I think, the government needs to act. We do know there's an issue here. You can't shy away from it. I can guarantee, Mark, we're going to be in about a month's time, coming up to Christmas, we'll have another 4 weeks worth of data, and we'll probably be talking about exactly the same thing. So my challenge to government is, you've got 4 weeks, let's get an answer before Christmas.
Yeah, that's great. We're going to hold them to that. We'll keep asking whoever's this week's health secretary to come on and talk about this. But yeah, you got till Christmas. We've had excess deaths now consistently since the late spring. Let us get some answers on it. Thank you very much, Jamie Jenkins. It's always a pleasure. Let's stump it out. Dev says, is the UK a serious country? Is it overrated on the global stage? Is it becoming ungovernable? Protesters do what they please, block motorways, cause accidents, but permitted by law. No control on immigration. Law permits, and they preach the world ignorant, and the innocent listen to them. Look at that building behind me. That's the Palace of Westminster. This country is a great country. It governed a quarter of the world from those buildings on the other side of the river. And that is unique in history. So it's exiting the stage as a laughingstock.